Hey, tonight we're going to talk about a time when someone thought it'd be a good idea to take an old WW1 submarine to the North Pole. You know, just casually sailing under the Arctic ice in a metal tube built for war, not polar exploration. Spoiler alert, it didn't exactly go as planned, and if you were there, well, let's just say your chances of coming back weren't great. If you're enjoying these bedtime stories about weird history, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Is it actually bedtime? Now, find a cozy spot, take a slow deep breath and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. The year is 1931. The Great Depression is spreading worldwide. Gangsters rule American cities, and you've just signed up for what might be the craziest adventure of the century. Congratulations, you've joined Sir Hubert Wilkins on his quest to reach the North Pole in a submarine. Your eyes crack open to near darkness. For a moment, you can't remember where you are until the cold metal wall against your cheek reminds you. You're inside the Nautilus, an old World War I submarine being repurposed for Arctic exploration. The steel bulkhead beside your bunk feels like ice against your skin. You pull the thin wool blanket tighter around your shoulders, but it does little to keep out the damp chill that permeates everything. The air inside the submarine smells of oil, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar metallic tang that comes from living inside what amounts to a steel cigar tube. Your breath makes little clouds in front of your face. From somewhere nearby, you hear the constant drip of condensation falling from the ceiling. It's like living in a cold, wet cave that happens to be filled with machinery. You swing your legs over the side of your narrow bunk and wince as your bare feet touch the freezing metal floor. The space is so confined that your shoulders brush against the bunks on either side as you sit up. 20 men live in this cramped space, sleeping in shifts, because there simply isn't room for everyone to lie down at once. You're one of the lucky ones who has an actual bunk. Some of the crew sleep in hammocks, strung wherever there's space. Your stomach growls, reminding you that it's time for breakfast, though in the perpetual artificial light of the submarine, time has started to lose meaning. Days and nights blend together in the electric glow of the sparse bulbs hanging overhead. You've been at sea for weeks now, sailing from New York toward the North Pole on a mission that many called impossible, even suicidal. You pull on your clothes quickly, trying to trap what little body heat you have. The layers feel damp against your skin. Nothing ever truly dries in here. The condensation from everyone's breath collects on the cold metal walls and drips down, soaking into clothing, bedding, papers, everything. You've taken to covering your face with a handkerchief while sleeping to avoid the irritating drips falling onto your face. The submarine rocks gently, reminding you that you're still at sea, not yet under the Arctic ice where the real adventure or danger will begin. You make your way toward the galley, squeezing past other crew members in the narrow corridor. Their faces look tired, unshaven, with dark circles under their eyes. The excitement that was present when you left New York has given way to the grinding reality of life aboard this aging vessel. "Morning," grunts Peterson, the radioman, as you squeeze past him. His face is pale and slightly green. He's been seasick since you hit rough seas 2 days ago. Many of the crew have been ill. The Nautilus wasn't designed for comfort in rough waters. When the waves hit hard, she rolls alarmingly, up to 40 or 50 degrees sometimes, sending unsecured items crashing across the compartments. In the tiny galley, Cook is trying to prepare something resembling breakfast on the small electric stove. The smell of burnt coffee fills the air, a luxury you won't have much longer as supplies begin to dwindle. You accept a tin cup of the bitter brew and a plate of beans and hardtack, the unappetizing but calorie-dense food that's becoming your regular diet. Captain wants all hands on deck for an announcement after breakfast, Cook tells you as he ladles out the beans. Something about the engines. Your heart sinks a little at the mention of engines. The Nautilus was already an old submarine when Sir Hubert Wilkins acquired her. Built in 1916, she served in World War I before being decommissioned. Now, renamed after the fictional submarine in Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, she's being asked to perform a task no submarine has ever done before: sail under the Arctic ice cap to the North Pole. You finish your breakfast quickly and make your way topside. The fresh air hits you like a revelation after the stale, humid atmosphere below. You take deep breaths, filling your lungs with the clean salt air. The day is overcast, the sea a dull grey that matches the sky, making the horizon nearly invisible. The water is relatively calm today, which is a welcome relief after the stormy days you've just endured. The crew assembles on the narrow deck of the Nautilus, despite the modifications made for this Arctic journey, including a special wooden superstructure with skids that should allow the submarine to slide along under the ice. She still looks essentially like what she is: a wartime vessel pressed into scientific service. Captain Dannenhauer, a veteran submarine commander, emerges from the conning tower. His weathered face is serious as he surveys the assembled crew. Beside him stands Sir Hubert Wilkins himself, the Australian explorer who dreamed up this audacious expedition. At 43, Wilkins is already famous for his Arctic and Antarctic explorations by air. He was the first to fly across the Arctic Ocean from Alaska to Spitsbergen, Norway. Now he wants to go under the ice. Men, Captain Dannenhauer begins, his voice carrying across the deck despite the wind. I won't sugarcoat this. We're having engine troubles. Both the port and starboard engines are experiencing failures. The engineers are working on it, but we're dead in the water for now. A murmur runs through the crew. This isn't the first mechanical problem you've encountered, but it's potentially the most serious. Without functioning engines, the Nautilus is at the mercy of the Atlantic's whims. Sir Hubert steps forward. Despite the circumstances, his eyes still hold that gleam of excitement and determination that convinced so many of you to join this expedition in the first place. I've sent out our coordinates, he says. Help will come. This is a setback, yes, but not the end of our journey. Remember why we're here, not just to reach the North Pole, but to conduct valuable scientific research that could change our understanding of the Arctic and its influence on global weather patterns. You notice some of the crew exchanging skeptical glances. The scientific mission is real enough. The Nautilus carries equipment for taking ocean depth soundings, measuring water temperature and salinity, studying marine life, and more. But for many of you, it was the adventure that drew you in, the chance to be part of history. Hours pass with the submarine drifting. The engineers work feverishly on the engines, but with limited parts and tools, there's only so much they can do. By midday, a distress signal has been sent out, and you're waiting to see if any vessels are close enough to render aid. The mood on board grows tense. You help where you can, but mostly there's just waiting. You find yourself on deck again, watching the endless grey sea and trying not to think about what happens if no help comes. You've been at sea long enough to know how vast and empty the Atlantic can be. Just when despair is beginning to set in, a lookout spots smoke on the horizon. Within the hour, you can make out the form of a ship approaching. It's the USS Wyoming, an American battleship on a training mission. The relief among the crew is palpable as the massive warship draws alongside your crippled submarine. The rescue isn't dignified. The Wyoming takes the Nautilus in tow like a parent dragging a reluctant child. Your pride takes a hit as the submarine is pulled across the Atlantic, but at least you're moving again, heading toward Ireland where repairs can be made. The towing process is rough. The submarine jerks and strains at the tow line, making life below deck even more uncomfortable. Sleep becomes nearly impossible as the vessel creaks and groans. Meals are reduced to cold rations because using the stove in these conditions is too dangerous. For days, this continues. Your body aches from constantly bracing yourself against the submarine's erratic movements. The damp cold seeps deeper into your bones. Minor injuries, cuts, bruises, sprains become common as crew members are thrown against equipment or bulkheads during particularly violent jerks. When you finally reach Queenstown Island, the relief is overwhelming. The submarine is taken to a shipyard where assessments can be made and repairs begun. For the first time in weeks, you set foot on solid ground again. Your legs feel strange, still expecting the constant motion of the sea. You and several other crew members immediately head for the nearest pub, desperate for a hot meal and a drink that isn't stale water or burnt coffee. The repairs take longer than anyone anticipated. Days stretch into weeks. Some essential parts need to be specially manufactured and shipped from the United States. Each delay pushes your schedule further back, eating into the narrow window of summer weather, when an Arctic expedition might have the best chance of success. During this time, some crew members begin to question the wisdom of continuing. You overhear whispered conversations about the age of the submarine, the mounting mechanical problems, the dangers that await in the Arctic. A few even speak of leaving the expedition. But a mixture of pride, loyalty to Sir Hubert, and the contracts you've all signed keeps the crew largely intact. Sir Hubert remains undeterred. He uses the time in port to give interviews to newspapers, promoting the expedition and securing additional funding. The Nautilus expedition has captured the public's imagination, with regular reports appearing in William Randolph Hearst's newspapers across America. Sir Hubert's vision of submarines as tools for Arctic exploration, opening up new realms of scientific discovery and potentially new shipping routes, is compelling. But you can't help wondering if the reality will match the dream. Finally, after more than a month of repairs, the Nautilus is deemed seaworthy again. The journey resumes, this time heading for Bergen, Norway, where you'll meet up with the scientific team and take on additional equipment before heading into Arctic waters. The crossing to Norway is thankfully uneventful. The repaired engines perform adequately, though the engineers keep a constant watch. The weather is mild, allowing for smooth sailing. For the first time since leaving New York, life aboard the Nautilus falls into a comfortable routine. But this period of calm doesn't last. As you approach Bergen, a storm hits. Not just any storm, but a North Sea gale that tests the submarine to its limits. Waves crash over the deck, making it impossible to remain topside. Below, conditions deteriorate rapidly. The violent rolling of the vessel, sometimes up to 57 degrees, sends everything not firmly secured flying across compartments. Several crew members sustain injuries from being thrown against equipment or bulkheads. The storm seems endless. Hour after hour, the Nautilus is tossed like a toy in the massive waves. Water begins to leak in through hatches and seals that weren't designed to withstand this kind of punishment. Crew members form bucket brigades, passing containers of seawater hand to hand to be emptied into the bilges where pumps can remove it. You work until your arms ache, scooping water and passing buckets, all while trying to keep your footing on the tilting, slippery floor. The air grows even more damp and cold. Exhaustion pulls at you, but stopping isn't an option. If too much water gets in, the submarine could sink. Just when it seems things couldn't get worse, one of the pumps fails. Panic flickers across faces as water begins to rise faster in the affected compartment. The chief engineer, face streaked with oil and sweat, works frantically to repair the pump, while others double their efforts with the remaining equipment. Through sheer determination and ingenuity, the crew keeps the Nautilus afloat until the storm finally passes. When you limp into Bergen Harbour, the submarine is a sorry sight, battered, leaking, and listing slightly to one side, but you've made it. In Bergen, a surprise awaits. Naval inspectors come aboard to assess the Nautilus's condition before she heads into Arctic waters. Their verdict is sobering. A Norwegian submarine expert, Captain Funk Nelson, examines the vessel thoroughly and later tells his colleague Harold Sverdrup, who will be joining you as the chief scientist, "I would never have sent my crews on board this submarine." This assessment sends a chill through the crew that has nothing to do with the Norwegian weather. But once again, Sir Hubert's determination prevails. Repairs are made, scientific equipment is loaded, and the final preparations for the Arctic journey begin. The scientific team comes aboard, bringing with them specialised instruments and equipment. Among them is Harold Sverdrup, an acknowledged expert in oceanography who will be leading the scientific aspects of the expedition. His presence adds credibility to the venture, though you notice he eyes the submarine's conditions with barely concealed concern. Despite all the setbacks, there's a renewed sense of purpose as you leave Bergen. The real adventure is about to begin. The Nautilus sets course for Spitsbergen, the northernmost point from which you'll launch the attempt to reach the North Pole. The journey to Spitsbergen is cold but manageable. As you move further north, the temperature inside the submarine drops steadily. Condensation becomes an even bigger problem, with moisture freezing on metal surfaces. You and the other crew members take to wearing multiple layers of clothing at all times and sleeping fully dressed. The lack of proper heating in the submarine becomes increasingly apparent. The Nautilus was never designed for Arctic conditions. There's no insulation in the hull, making it essentially like living inside a refrigerator. Your hands grow stiff with cold, making every task more difficult. Simple things like writing in your journal or maintaining equipment become challenges when your fingers won't cooperate. Water pipes begin to freeze, creating yet another crisis. Fresh water becomes strictly rationed, half a bucket per day for drinking, cooking, and minimal hygiene. The smell of unwashed bodies adds to the already pungent atmosphere inside the submarine. Everyone is dirty, cold, and increasingly irritable. Sleep becomes even more elusive. The cold makes it impossible to ever truly relax. You lie in your bunk, wrapped in every piece of clothing you own plus your blanket, and still shiver uncontrollably. The constant motion, the dripping condensation, the snoring and muttering of other crew members, and the ever-present hum and clank of machinery create a symphony of disruption that keeps real rest at bay. Despite these hardships, excitement builds as you approach Spitsbergen. This is the jumping-off point for the real mission, the attempt to reach the North Pole under the ice. Scientific work begins in earnest, with the team taking measurements and samples as you travel. These activities provide a welcome distraction from the discomfort and give meaning to the hardships you're enduring. Finally, the day comes when you encounter your first ice floes. The sight of these floating chunks of ice, some as large as small islands, brings home the reality of what you're undertaking. The Arctic is no longer an abstract destination, but a very real and potentially deadly environment surrounding your fragile vessel. The Nautilus moves cautiously among the ice floes, navigating through open water where possible. Captain Dannenhauer, experienced though he is, has never commanded a submarine in these conditions before. Every decision carries weight, and the tension on the bridge is palpable. As you push further north, following the edge of the pack ice, the open water becomes scarcer. Soon you'll need to attempt your first dive under the ice, the true test of whether this audacious expedition can succeed. On the evening before this momentous attempt, Sir Hubert gathers the crew. Despite the numbing cold and the uncertainty ahead, his enthusiasm remains infectious. Tomorrow, he says, his breath visible in the frigid air of the control room. "We will do what no humans have ever done before. We will take this vessel beneath the Arctic ice and begin our journey to the pole. The eyes of the world are upon us, gentlemen. What we learn here may change our understanding of the Arctic forever and open new possibilities for exploration and commerce." You try to share his optimism as you return to your bunk that night, but your mind keeps wandering to all the things that could go wrong. The aging submarine with its history of mechanical failures, the unpredictable ice, the fact that if something goes catastrophically wrong while under the ice, there will be no hope of rescue. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, filled with dreams of crushing pressure and endless white. When you wake, it's to the announcement that today is the day. The Nautilus will attempt her first dive under the Arctic ice. The preparations are meticulous. Every system is checked and rechecked. The special equipment designed for under-ice operations, including the unique ice drill that should, in theory, allow you to bore through to the surface if necessary, is given a final inspection. You take your station, heart pounding in your chest. Through the periscope, you can see the edge of an ice floe looming ahead. Captain Dannenhauer gives the order to dive, and the Nautilus begins her descent into the frigid Arctic waters. Your ears pop as the pressure changes. The submarine tilts forward slightly as the ballast tanks fill with water. The familiar sounds of the vessel change subtly as you submerge. There's a moment of eerie quiet, then a new sound begins, the scraping of ice against the hull above you. It's a terrifying noise, like giant fingernails dragging across the submarine's skin. The sound resonates through the metal, making it impossible to ignore. Everyone freezes, eyes darting upward as if they could see through the hull to the ice above. "Normal," Captain Dannenhauer says calmly, though you notice his knuckles are white where he grips the control panel. "Just the ice making contact with our superstructure." The scraping continues as the Nautilus moves forward under the ice. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours as you push deeper into territory no submarine has ever entered before. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, suddenly, disaster strikes. The submarine lurches violently, throwing several crew members to the floor. Warning lights flash on the control panel. Something is wrong with the steering system. "Diving planes not responding," calls out the helmsman, his voice tight with alarm. The submarine begins to tilt downward at an alarming angle. Without functioning diving planes, the horizontal rudders that control depth, you can't maintain a stable position underwater. The Nautilus could plummet to crushing depths or rise uncontrollably to slam into the ice above. Captain Dannenhauer reacts instantly, ordering ballast tanks blown to bring you back to the surface. It's a desperate move that could damage the submarine if you hit the ice too hard, but the alternative is worse. The Nautilus rises rapidly, metal groaning under the strain. Everyone holds their breath, waiting for the impact with the ice overhead, but fortune is with you. The submarine surfaces in a small area of open water between ice floes. On the surface, an inspection reveals the worst. The diving planes at the stern of the submarine are completely gone. Whether they were torn off by ice or lost earlier in the journey is unclear, but the result is the same. Without them, controlled underwater navigation is impossible, especially under ice. The mood aboard the Nautilus turns somber as the reality sinks in. The expedition as originally conceived to travel under the ice to the North Pole can no longer be accomplished. The submarine simply cannot function safely in these conditions without its diving planes. A diver is sent into the freezing water to confirm the damage, and what he reports sends a chill through the crew. There are signs that the diving planes weren't simply torn off by ice or accident. They appear to have been deliberately damaged. Sabotage becomes the whispered explanation, though no one can prove who might have done it or why. Despite this devastating setback, Sir Hubert is determined to salvage something from the expedition. If you can't dive safely under the ice, you can still conduct valuable scientific research in the open waters at the edge of the pack ice. The Nautilus will continue north as far as possible, using open leads in the ice where available. For the next several days, that's exactly what you do. The scientific team works tirelessly, collecting data on water temperature, salinity, marine life, and more. They discover something surprising, evidence of a branch of the Gulf Stream reaching far into the Arctic, influencing temperature and potentially weather patterns across Europe. Your role shifts from submarine crew member to scientific assistant, helping with the collection and recording of data. The work is cold and often uncomfortable, but there's satisfaction in knowing that despite everything, the expedition is still contributing to scientific knowledge. But the Nautilus wasn't designed for extended Arctic operations. Conditions aboard deteriorate further as systems strain against the extreme cold. The freshwater situation becomes critical. Food supplies dwindle. Most concerning of all, the hull begins to develop slow leaks as the cold makes the metal brittle and joints start to fail. After reaching 82° north, the furthest north any vessel had reached under its own power at that time, Sir Hubert finally acknowledges that it's time to turn back. The scientific data you've collected is valuable, but continuing to push the aging submarine would be recklessly dangerous. The journey south is no less challenging than the northward voyage. Another fierce storm hits, battering the already weakened Nautilus. More leaks develop. The list to one side becomes more pronounced. Everyone knows you're racing against time to reach safety before the submarine gives up entirely. When you finally limp back to Bergen, Norway on September 20th, 1931, the Nautilus is barely holding together. She's leaking badly, engines are failing again, and the hull is dented and scarred from encounters with ice. The submarine that left New York with such high hopes now looks like a battered wreck. The final blow comes when Sir Hubert receives word that the US Navy, which still owns the Nautilus, has deemed her unfit for return across the Atlantic. The only option is to scuttle her, to deliberately sink the submarine that has been your home for these many difficult months. On November 20th, 1931, the Nautilus is towed out into the Byfjord near Bergen, with a small crew aboard to open valves and prepare her for her final journey. The submarine that dared to challenge the Arctic slips beneath the waves for the last time, coming to rest on the seabed 1,138 feet below. As you watch from the deck of the towing vessel, a mixture of emotions washes over you. Disappointment at not achieving the expedition's primary goal, pride in what you did accomplish despite overwhelming obstacles, relief at having survived, and a strange sadness at seeing the Nautilus go, despite all the discomfort and danger she represented. Sir Hubert remains optimistic to the end. This was just the beginning, he tells you and the other crew members. What we've learned will pave the way for future expeditions. Someday, a submarine will reach the North Pole. He's right, though none of you will live to see it. 27 years later, in 1958, the USS Nautilus, a modern nuclear submarine named in honor of your vessel, will complete the journey you attempted, passing beneath the North Pole and fulfilling Sir Hubert's vision. As you drift off to sleep that night, in a real bed on solid ground for the first time in months, you reflect on the adventure you've just experienced, the bitter cold that never let you forget you were in the Arctic, the constant dampness that soaked into everything, the mechanical failures and storms that nearly claimed your lives multiple times, the cramped conditions and meagre rations, the fear and uncertainty of pushing into unknown territory. It was an ordeal that tested the limits of human endurance, and one that you somehow survived when many thought you wouldn't. Your eyelids grow heavy as your tired body finally relaxes into true rest, free from the cold, the damp, and the constant motion of the sea. Your breathing slows, matching the gentle rhythm of the waves you can hear through your window. The Arctic adventure is over, but the memories of ice scraping against metal, of condensation dripping from every surface, of huddling for warmth in a frozen steel tube, will stay with you forever. As sleep claims you at last, you drift away not on stormy seas, but on dreams of icebergs glittering in the Arctic sun and the endless white expanse that still waits to be explored. The morning light seeps through your window, and for a moment you're disoriented. The bed doesn't sway, the air doesn't smell of engine oil and unwashed bodies. Then you remember, you're in a small Norwegian boarding house. The Nautilus expedition is over, but the experience has marked you in ways you're only beginning to understand. You stretch your arms without hitting a bulkhead or another crew member, a simple luxury that now feels miraculous. Your joints ache from months of cold and damp, and your hands are rough from rope burns and frostbite. Your skin still carries the pallor of someone who spent too long away from sunlight. You catch your reflection in a small mirror on the wall and barely recognize yourself. Your face is gaunt, your eyes deeper set than before. The Arctic has taken something from you that you may never get back. After washing with hot water, another forgotten luxury, you dress and head down to a small cafe where you've agreed to meet Harald Sverdrup, the Norwegian oceanographer who joined the expedition in Bergen. Despite the failure to reach the North Pole, Sverdrup is eager to discuss the scientific findings that did come out of your journey. You find him at a corner table, papers spread out before him, scribbling notes with intense concentration. He looks up when you approach, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Ah, there you are," he says, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I've been analysing our readings. The data we collected about the Gulf Stream is quite remarkable. We've proven that a branch of it reaches much farther north than previously thought." You nod, remembering the days spent working with the Nansen bottles, special containers that could be lowered into the ocean to collect water samples from specific depths. You would drop a weight down the line that would hit the bottle, flip it upside down, and seal it shut, trapping water from that exact depth. It was precision work made nearly impossible by fingers numb with cold and a submarine that never stopped moving. "What about the gravity measurements?" you ask, reaching for the coffee the waitress sets before you. The warmth of the cup feels wonderful against your still tender hands. "Fascinating results," Sverdrup says, eyes lighting up. "We've confirmed that the Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's flattened at the poles. The pendulum swings faster there because gravity is stronger. You're closer to the Earth's center." Your mind drifts back to the pendulum experiments. Farr, the scientist in charge of that work, had set up a special apparatus in what little space was available. The constant swaying of the submarine made readings difficult, but he persisted, taking measurement after measurement, sometimes working through the night by the dim glow of electric lamps. "And the jellyfish," you say, remembering the strange, beautiful creatures you'd seen through the observation windows. "I've never seen anything like them." Sverdrup nods enthusiastically. "Species that can survive in those frigid waters are remarkable. Their adaptations to extreme conditions could teach us much about life itself." The coffee warms you from the inside, but you still feel a persistent chill deep in your bones. You wonder if it will ever truly leave you after those months in the Arctic. "What happens now?" you ask. "To all our findings? I'll publish papers, of course," Sverdrup says. "And Sir Hubert, well, he never gives up." he's already talking about another attempt with a purpose-built submarine. You're not surprised. Despite everything, the mechanical failures, the storms, the sabotage, the bitter conditions, Wilkins maintained his vision throughout. His belief in submarines as tools for Arctic exploration never wavered, even when reality seemed determined to prove him wrong. After breakfast, you wander down to the harbour. Though the Nautilus is gone now, resting on the ocean floor, you find yourself drawn to the water. The air is crisp, but nothing like the biting cold of the Arctic. Fishing boats and cargo vessels come and go, their crews going about their business, unaware of how lucky they are to work on ships designed for human comfort. Your mind drifts back to the specialised equipment that had been added to the Nautilus for Arctic exploration. The wooden superstructure with skids designed to let the submarine slide along the underside of the ice pack. The shock absorber built into the bow to protect against collisions with submerged ice. The diving chamber converted from the torpedo room, which allowed scientists to lower instruments directly into the water while submerged. Most ambitious of all was the ice drill, a device meant to bore through the ice above the submarine to create an air hole if you became trapped. You had tested it only once, on land before departing, and it had failed spectacularly, getting stuck in a block of ice until someone helped it along with a hammer. Yet somehow that obvious warning sign had been ignored in the rush to begin the expedition. You find a bench overlooking the fjord and sit, letting the normal sounds of a working harbour wash over you. How different from the constant mechanical hum and clank that formed the soundtrack of your life aboard the Nautilus. There, every sound mattered. A change in pitch or rhythm could signal a new problem developing, another system on the verge of failure. Life aboard the submarine returns to you in vivid flashes. The control room, where Captain Dannenhauer would stand for hours, faced tense with concentration as he navigated through treacherous waters. The engine room, always too hot compared to the freezing rest of the vessel, where engineers worked ceaselessly to keep the temperamental machinery running. The tiny galley where meals were prepared on a small portable stove because the electric range had short-circuited early in the journey. You remember the routines that structured your days, the watch rotations that meant someone was always awake, monitoring vital systems, the constant battle against moisture, wiping down surfaces, trying to keep equipment dry, hanging up wet clothes in the vain hope they might dry. The rationing of fresh water, counting each precious drop. And there were the people, 20 men crammed into a space designed for military efficiency, not comfort or privacy. You came to know everything about them, their breathing patterns, their snores, their personal habits, both endearing and annoying. Some names and faces float to the surface of your memory more clearly than others. There was Johnson, the engineer who could fix almost anything with wire and determination, who sang old sea shanties under his breath as he worked. Peters, the quiet scientist who collected specimens of plankton and could speak for hours about the tiny organisms most people never even notice. Williams, the young sailor on his first major voyage, whose initial excitement had gradually given way to a hollow-eyed exhaustion. And of course, there was Sir Hubert himself. Unlike many expedition leaders who commanded from a distance, Wilkins was always in the thick of things. He helped with repairs, assisted with scientific measurements, and took his turn at the mundane chores that kept the submarine functioning. His enthusiasm never flagged, even as setback after setback piled up. When you were all near breaking point, cold, exhausted, and disheartened, his unwavering belief in the mission somehow kept everyone going. You recall one particular night when morale had hit a dangerous low. It was after discovering the diving planes were missing, when the primary goal of the expedition seemed impossible. The submarine was anchored in a small lead of open water surrounded by ice. Most of the crew sat in gloomy silence, the weight of failure hanging heavy in the air. Wilkins had gathered everyone in the cramped mess area and unfolded a map of the Arctic. "Gentlemen," he'd said, his Australian accent more pronounced than usual, "we may not reach the pole this time, but look at where we are." His finger traced the route you'd taken. "No submarine has ever come this far north. The data we're collecting is unprecedented. What we learn here will make it possible for others to succeed where we've had to turn back." It wasn't just empty words. The very next day, he was the first to volunteer for the uncomfortable job of collecting ice samples from an adjacent floe, spending hours in the biting wind with minimal protection, all for the sake of scientific data. Now, sitting in the Norwegian sunshine, you wonder what will become of Wilkins and his dream. History tends to remember successes, not noble failures. Will anyone recall this attempt 20 years from now, or will it be just another forgotten footnote in the long story of polar exploration? A ship's horn blasts, startling you from your reverie. You check your watch and realize you've been sitting here for over an hour, lost in memories. It's time to meet with some of the other crew members for lunch. Despite everything you endured together, or perhaps because of it, many of you have formed bonds that will last a lifetime. The small restaurant is already half full when you arrive. 4 of your crewmates have claimed a corner table. Williams waves you over, looking healthier than he has in months. Some colour has returned to his face, and he's gained back a little of the weight he lost during the expedition. "There he is!" calls Johnson, raising a glass in your direction. The man who kept the radio working when everything else was failing. You smile and take a seat, accepting the beer someone pushes toward you. The conversation flows easily, skipping between reminiscences of the journey, plans for the future, and gossip about what's become of other crew members. "Heard from Carter yesterday," William says, between bites of fish stew. He's already signed on with another expedition, heading to Antarctica this time. "Glutton for punishment," Johnson laughs. "Me, I'm taking a nice warm job in a factory back home. Had enough cold to last a lifetime." "What about you?" Peters asks, looking your way. "Going back to normal life?" You consider the question. What is normal after what you've experienced? How do you explain to people who weren't there what it was like to live for months in a frozen metal tube, pushing into one of the most hostile environments on Earth? How do you convey the mixture of terror and wonder you felt seeing vast ice floes stretching to the horizon, knowing you were attempting to go beneath them in a vessel barely up to the task? "Not sure yet," you answer honestly. "Need some time to think." The others nod in understanding. Each of you is processing the expedition in your own way, trying to make sense of what you've been through. As lunch continues, the conversation turns to some of the stranger moments from your journey. The time the cook tried to make a birthday cake using powdered eggs and stale flour, producing something with the consistency of a brick, the ghostly sounds of ice creaking against the hull that kept everyone awake for 3 nights straight, the surreal beauty of the midnight sun reflecting off ice floes, creating a landscape that seemed to belong to another world entirely. "Remember when we thought we saw a polar bear?" Williams says, grinning, "and it turned out to be just a strangely shaped chunk of ice? Or when the captain's logbook froze solid and he had to thaw it over a lamp before he could write in it?" adds Johnson. You all laugh, the shared memories creating a warmth that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. These are stories that only the 20 of you will ever truly understand, experiences that have marked you as different from those who stayed home. After lunch, you part ways with promises to stay in touch, though you all know that life will likely pull you in different directions. Some will return to the sea on other vessels, some will go back to families and jobs waiting for them, some may even join future polar expeditions, unable to resist the call of the unknown despite everything they've endured. You walk back to your boarding house alone, taking a longer route to enjoy the simple pleasure of movement without confinement. In the distance, mountains rise against a clear blue sky, so different from the endless white horizon of the Arctic. The streets are busy with people going about their normal lives, unaware of how precarious existence can become in more extreme settings. When you reach your room, you find a telegram waiting. It's from Sir Hubert, who left Norway a few days earlier for meetings in London. The message is brief but characteristic of the man, returning to America next week, planning presentation of findings to Geographical Society. Your presence requested if possible. Grateful for your service. Wilkins. You fold the telegram and place it in your journal, which contains your own detailed account of the expedition. Perhaps someday, when the memories aren't quite so raw, you'll turn these notes into something more formal, a record of what it was really like aboard the Nautilus, beyond the newspaper headlines and scientific papers. For now, though, you're content to let the experience settle within you. The Arctic has changed you in ways you're still discovering. You see the world differently now, more aware of both its dangers and its wonders, more conscious of human frailty and human resilience. That night, you sleep deeply for the first time in months. No cramped bunk, no constant noise, no fear of what might go wrong next. Just the quiet darkness and the knowledge that you survived something extraordinary. When you wake the next morning, you make a decision. You'll go to America for Wilkins's presentation. You'll help ensure that what you all accomplished and what you all endured isn't forgotten. The Nautilus may rest on the ocean floor, but the knowledge gained from your journey will live on. Over the next few days, you continue to recover your strength. The persistent cough you developed in the damp conditions of the submarine finally begins to subside. Your frostbitten fingers heal, though 2 nails have turned black and will eventually fall off. The weight you lost starts to return as you enjoy regular meals of fresh food. You spend time writing detailed notes about your experiences while they're still fresh in your mind. The scientific aspects interest you particularly, how the ocean temperature varied at different depths, the strange marine life you observed, the way the ice moved and changed. Though you're not a scientist by training, your observations might still have value. One afternoon you run into Sverdrup again. He's carrying a stack of papers and looking pleased. Just got word from the university, he tells you. They're publishing our findings on the Gulf Stream. It's going to change how we understand ocean currents and their effect on climate. That's wonderful, you say, genuinely happy that something positive has come from the expedition. And there's more, Sverdrup continues. The gravity measurements, the marine biology observations, the ice studies, all of it matters. Sir Hubert was right about one thing. Submarines can be valuable tools for Arctic research, even if this particular vessel wasn't quite up to the task. You nod, thinking of how the Nautilus's torpedo room had been converted into a diving chamber that allowed instruments to be lowered directly into the ocean. When the watertight door was closed and pressure equalized, scientists could open a trapdoor in the floor and deploy their equipment into the sea below. It was an ingenious system that worked despite the submarine's other failings. Do you think someone will try again? You ask. With a better submarine? Sverdrup considers this. I believe they will. The scientific potential is too great to ignore, but it will take time and proper funding and a vessel designed specifically for the purpose, not a wartime leftover held together with hope and wire. You both laugh at this apt description of the Nautilus, yet despite its flaws, you feel a strange affection for the old submarine that was your home for so many months. She tried her best with what she had, just like her crew. The day before you're set to leave for America, you make one final visit to the fjord where the Nautilus was scuttled. The water is calm and gives no indication of what lies 1,138 feet below. You stand at the edge of a small dock, looking out at the spot where the submarine slipped beneath the waves for the last time. "Goodbye, old girl," you murmur, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a sunken vessel but needing some form of closure nonetheless. You did your best. As you turn to leave, you notice an elderly Norwegian fisherman watching you curiously. He asks in halting English if you were part of the submarine expedition. When you nod, his weathered face creases in a smile. "Brave men," he says simply. "Very brave or very foolish. Sometimes same thing for Chell." You can't help but laugh. "Sometimes they are," you agree. On the boat to England and then on the ship to America, you have time to reflect on everything that happened, the mechanical failures that plagued the expedition from the start, the brutal storms that battered the submarine and tested her limits, the sabotage, or at least suspected sabotage, of the diving planes that made under-ice navigation impossible, the bitter cold that permeated everything, the scientific discoveries that might, in the end, justify all the hardship. But mostly, you think about the men who shared this extraordinary journey, 20 individuals from different backgrounds with different skills and personalities thrown together in extreme circumstances, how some rose to the occasion while others faltered, how tempers flared in the cramped conditions only to be followed by moments of unexpected kindness, how you all, somehow, made it through. By the time you reach New York, you've made peace with the expedition's outcome. It wasn't what any of you had hoped for, but it wasn't nothing either. You step onto American soil changed, tougher in some ways, more thoughtful in others, and with stories few would believe, even if you tried to tell them. Sir Hubert meets you at the dock, as energetic and optimistic as ever despite everything. His handshake is firm, his eyes bright with new plans and possibilities. "Already working on the next attempt," he tells you as you walk together toward waiting cars. A proper submarine this time, built for Arctic conditions, air conditioning, better insulation, more reliable engines. You listen, admiring his persistence, even as you wonder if you would ever willingly return to the ice. Perhaps not, but someone will. That's the nature of exploration. Each attempt, successful or not, paves the way for the next. That evening, in a warm hotel room with soft blankets and no sound of engines or creaking ice, you drift towards sleep thinking about the Arctic, not as it was from the cramped confines of the Nautilus, but as it might be seen someday from a vessel truly capable of travelling beneath the ice. The mysterious world under the North Pole still waiting to be discovered. Your breathing slows as you sink deeper into comfort. The memories of cold and fear begin to fade, replaced by a sense of having been part of something larger than yourself, an attempt that failed in its immediate goal but succeeded in pushing the boundaries of what was possible. As sleep claims you, your last conscious thought is that someday someone will reach the North Pole by submarine, and when they do, perhaps they'll remember the Nautilus and her crew who dared to try when no one else would. You wouldn't have survived the North Pole in a World War I submarine. But you survived the attempt, and sometimes that's victory enough. New York City in 1931 feels like a different world compared to the silent white expanses of the Arctic. The city pulses with energy despite the Great Depression that has left so many without work. As you step into the Grand Hall of the American Geographical Society, the contrast between this elegant space and the cramped, freezing interior of the Nautilus strikes you physically. Your body still hasn't fully readjusted to life on land. You find yourself unconsciously bracing for a roll or pitch that never comes, your hand reaching out to steady yourself against movement that isn't there. You adjust your borrowed suit jacket, uncomfortable in formal clothes after months in layers of practical, often damp wool. Your hands, still rough and marked with lingering frostbite scars, feel out of place holding the delicate champagne flute a waiter has pressed upon you. Several other crew members stand nearby looking equally uncomfortable in their finery. Only Sir Hubert Wilkins seems completely at ease, moving through the crowd of academics, wealthy patrons and journalists with the confidence of someone accustomed to such gatherings. "There you are," comes a voice behind you. You turn to find Harold Sverdrup, the oceanographer, his face more relaxed than you ever saw it during the expedition. "Sir Hubert wants us all near the stage in 5 minutes. The presentation is about to begin." You nod and make your way through the crowd, noticing how people glance at you and the other crew members with a mixture of curiosity and respect. To them, you are adventurers who braved the unknown. They can't see the terror you felt when the submarine rolled 57 degrees in a storm, or the slow misery of never being truly warm for months on end, or the moment when you realized the diving planes were gone and with them any hope of reaching the pole. Sir Hubert has spared no expense for this presentation. The stage is set with large photographs of the Arctic, the Nautilus, and the crew at work. A projector is ready to show motion pictures taken during the expedition. There's even a detailed model of the submarine, complete with the modifications made for Arctic exploration. The wooden superstructure with its skids, the special ice drill, the diving chamber. The lights dim and Sir Hubert steps to the podium. Even now, months after the expedition's end, his enthusiasm remains undimmed. He speaks of the journey not as a failure, but as a pioneering effort that will pave the way for future submarine exploration of the Arctic. He describes the scientific discoveries, the unexpected branch of the Gulf Stream, the gravity measurements that help prove the Earth is flattened at the poles, the marine life found in waters few have ever studied. As he talks, your mind drifts back to specific moments aboard the Nautilus that few in this elegant audience could comprehend. The daily fight against condensation, with moisture constantly dripping from every surface, the way sound travelled through the submarine's metal hull so that you could hear someone snoring 3 compartments away but couldn't make out the words of the person sitting next to you when the engines were running. The strange isolation of being in one of the most remote places on Earth, yet never having a moment of true privacy or solitude. You remember the rhythms of daily life aboard the submarine that became second nature over time, the watch rotations that meant someone was always awake, monitoring vital systems, the careful choreography required for 20 men to move through spaces designed for far fewer, the constant need to conserve water, heat, energy, food. Sir Hubert introduces each crew member, calling you up one by one to acknowledge your contributions. When your name is called, you walk to the stage, momentarily blinded by flashbulbs as photographers capture the moment for newspapers. You shake Sir Hubert's hand, managing a smile for the cameras, before returning to your place. As the presentation continues, Sir Hubert shows motion pictures of the expedition. The footage is grainy and jumps in places, but it captures moments that transport you immediately back to the Arctic. There's the Nautilus pushing through floating ice, her deck awash with spray. There's Williams and Johnson working to repair equipment on the open deck, their breath visible in the frigid air. There you are, helping to lower a scientific instrument through the diving chamber, your face tense with concentration. The audience gasps at scenes they find dramatic or beautiful. The midnight sun casting an otherworldly glow over ice floes, the submarine partially submerged under the edge of the pack ice. But what they're seeing is sanitized, romanticized. The camera doesn't capture the bone-deep cold that made every task twice as difficult. It doesn't show the fear in everyone's eyes when the storm hit and water started coming in faster than the pumps could remove it. It doesn't convey the creeping claustrophobia of spending months in a space where you couldn't stand fully upright without hitting your head. After the formal presentation, there's a reception where patrons and scientists can speak directly with expedition members. You find yourself surrounded by people eager to hear about your experiences, but struggling to find words that will make them understand. "What was the most difficult part?" asks a woman in an expensive dress, diamonds glittering at her throat. How do you answer that? The constant cold, the mechanical failures, the knowledge that you were hundreds of miles from any possible rescue, the moment when you realized someone may have deliberately sabotaged the diving planes. Everything was challenging in its own way, you finally say. But I think it was the unpredictability. We never knew what would happen next, what would break, what the weather would do, what we might find beneath the ice. She nods as if she understands, but her eyes tell you she doesn't. Not really. How could she? You barely understand it yourself, even having lived through it. Later, you find yourself in conversation with an Arctic expert who asks more technical questions about the submarine's performance in icy conditions. This is easier to discuss, the factual aspects of the journey rather than the emotional or physical toll. The Nautilus was never designed for Arctic exploration, you explain. She was a World War I submarine built for combat, not scientific research. We modified her as best we could, but she wasn't ideal for what we were trying to do. And the ice drill? He asks. I understand it was meant to create air holes if you became trapped under the ice. You can't help but laugh. Yes, that was the theory, but we never got to properly test it in actual Arctic conditions. During our one test on land before the expedition, it got stuck in the ice block and someone had to free it with a hammer. Not very encouraging when you're betting your life on a piece of equipment. The scientist's eyes widen slightly. And yet you still went. We still went, you confirm, wondering now at your own boldness or foolishness. As the evening progresses, you notice how Sir Hubert deftly steers conversations toward future possibilities rather than dwelling on what went wrong. He speaks of a new submarine, purpose-built for Arctic exploration, with proper insulation, reliable engines, and better safety features. He talks about the scientific questions still waiting to be answered beneath the polar ice cap. His vision remains undimmed by reality. By the time you return to your hotel room, you're exhausted from the constant questions and the effort of translating your experiences into something others can grasp. You sit on the edge of the bed, removing your borrowed shoes and flexing your toes against the carpet. Such a simple pleasure. Warm feet. During the Arctic journey, your feet were never truly warm, not even when you slept. The next morning brings more interviews, these with newspaper reporters eager for dramatic stories of danger and heroism. You try to be honest without sensationalizing, but you can see the disappointment in their eyes when you don't provide the hair-raising tales they want. The reality of the expedition was less about moments of acute danger and more about the grinding difficulty of daily existence in conditions humans weren't meant to endure. One young reporter, more perceptive than the others, asks about the scientific work conducted during the expedition. This gives you a chance to talk about something that matters, the real purpose behind all the hardship. We collected data that no one had ever gathered before, you explain. Water temperature and salinity readings from parts of the Arctic Ocean that had never been studied. We discovered that a branch of the Gulf Stream reaches much farther north than previously thought, which helps explain why parts of northern Europe have milder climates than their latitude would suggest. You describe the Nansen bottles used to collect water samples from different depths, the special thermometers that could record temperature at various levels, the plankton nets that captured tiny marine organisms. You explain how the diving chamber converted from the torpedo room allowed scientists to lower instruments directly into the ocean while the submarine remained relatively stable. "And what about marine life?" the reporter asks. "Did you see anything unusual?" Your mind goes to the jellyfish that Sir Hubert wrote about in his diary, graceful creatures drifting past the observation windows, seemingly unbothered by the extreme conditions. You think of the plankton samples that revealed organisms adapted to live in near-freezing temperatures and the readings that showed how life existed at all depths of the Arctic Ocean, not just near the surface as some had theorized. "We found life everywhere we looked," you tell him. "Even in the harshest conditions, living things find a way to adapt and survive." As you say this, you realize it applies to the crew as well. You all adapted to conditions that seemed unbearable at first. You found ways to function despite the cold, the damp, the confinement, the constant noise. Humans, like the Arctic marine life, are more resilient than they appear. The days in New York blur together. More presentations, more interviews, more questions from people who can never truly understand what you experienced. Sir Hubert works tirelessly to secure funding for his next expedition, using the data and footage from the Nautilus journey to convince potential backers that submarine exploration of the Arctic is both possible and valuable. You find yourself increasingly drawn to the scientific aspects of the expedition. The mechanical failures and physical hardships fade somewhat in your memory, while the discoveries and unanswered questions take on greater importance. You spend hours with Sverdrup and other scientists, reviewing data and discussing implications. There's talk of publishing papers, of contributing to international understanding of the Arctic and its influence on global weather patterns. One afternoon, Sir Hubert invites you to his temporary office at the Geographical Society. Maps and charts cover every surface, along with drawings of a new submarine design he's developing. "I wanted to speak with you privately," he says, clearing space for you to sit, "about your future plans." You realize you haven't thought much beyond the immediate aftermath of the expedition. Before joining the Nautilus, you had been working as a radio operator on merchant vessels. That life seems distant now, almost belonging to another person. "I'm planning another expedition," Sir Hubert continues. "Not immediately. It will take time to secure funding and build a proper submarine, but when I go, I'd like you to come with me." The offer takes you by surprise. Despite everything you endured on the Nautilus, despite the danger and discomfort and ultimate failure to reach the pole, Sir Hubert believes you would willingly do it again. "You don't have to decide now," he adds, seeing your hesitation. "Just know that there will be a place for you. You proved yourself out there, kept the communications working when everything else was failing, helped with the scientific work, never lost your nerve, even when things were at their worst." You thank him for the offer, promising to think it over. As you leave his office, your mind is already turning over the possibilities. Could you face the Arctic again? Would you want to? The memory of bitter cold and constant danger is still fresh, but so is the memory of standing on the deck of the Nautilus under the midnight sun, surrounded by an ice-scape of otherworldly beauty that few humans have ever witnessed. That evening, you attend a small dinner with some of the crew members who have remained in New York. The conversation is easier here, away from cameras and curious strangers. You talk about the expedition in the shorthand that develops among people who have shared extreme experiences. Brief references and knowing looks that convey what outsiders would need paragraphs to understand. "Heard from Johnson," Williams says, passing you a bread roll. "He's signed on with a cargo ship heading to South America. Says he wants to be somewhere warm for a change." "Can't blame him," someone else adds. "I still can't feel my toes properly." You all laugh, but there's truth in the jest. The physical effects of the expedition linger. Frostbite scars, persistent coughs from months in damp conditions, joints that ache when the weather changes. The Arctic marked your bodies as surely as it marked your minds. "What about you?" Peters asks, turning to you. "Going back to sea?" You mention Sir Hubert's offer, and the table falls silent for a moment. "Would you do it?" Williams asks finally. "Go back to the Arctic?" It's the question you've been asking yourself since leaving Sir Hubert's office. Would you voluntarily return to conditions that pushed you to the very limits of endurance? Would you again risk your life in one of the most hostile environments on Earth? I don't know, you answer honestly. Maybe, if the submarine was better designed, if we had proper equipment, if there was a real chance of reaching the pole. Peters nods thoughtfully. "The science is worth it," he says. "What we learned, it matters. It changes how we understand the Arctic, the oceans, even the shape of the Earth itself." Later that night, unable to sleep, you find yourself drawn to the window of your hotel room. New York spreads out below, a landscape of lights and human ingenuity, so different from the pristine wilderness of the Arctic, yet connected to it in ways most people never consider. The Gulf Stream that you helped map influences weather patterns that affect cities like this one. The gravity measurements taken near the pole contribute to understanding the very shape of the planet everyone inhabits. Your thoughts turn to the future. Sir Hubert's vision of a purpose-built submarine exploring beneath the polar ice cap, the scientific questions still waiting to be answered, the mysteries that lie under the North Pole, which no human has yet seen. Would you go back? The question remains open, but you're surprised to find yourself considering it seriously. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, the Arctic has claimed a part of you that can never fully return to ordinary life. There's something addictive about pushing beyond what most people experience, about testing the very limits of human endurance and ingenuity. The truth is, you wouldn't have survived the North Pole in a World War I submarine. No one would have. The Nautilus was never equal to the task she was given, but with a better vessel, with proper equipment and preparation, perhaps the dream isn't impossible after all. As dawn breaks over the city, you finally drift towards sleep, your mind filled with images of ice and sea and the endless white horizon of the Arctic. In your dreams, you're back aboard a submarine, not the Nautilus, but something newer, stronger, purpose-built for the extreme conditions. In this dream vessel, you slide smoothly beneath the ice, the North Pole directly overhead, achieving what you and your crewmates attempted but couldn't accomplish. The days in New York continue, filled with presentations and interviews, but your thoughts increasingly turn to what might come next. You find yourself studying Sir Hubert's designs for a new submarine with genuine interest, offering suggestions based on your experiences aboard the Nautilus. You spend hours with scientists discussing what could be learned from a successful under-ice journey to the pole. One morning, you receive a telegram from Captain Dannenhauer, who returned to active naval service after the expedition. He writes that he's been following reports about a new German submarine design with significantly improved diving capabilities and wonders if such technology might be adapted for Arctic exploration. The captain, it seems, hasn't given up on the dream either. You're surprised by how many of the crew remain in contact, sharing news and opportunities, bound by the unique experience you all shared. Even those who swore they'd never go near the Arctic again seem unable to fully leave it behind. The journey changed you all in ways that make ordinary life seem somehow less real, less immediate. At your final meeting with Sir Hubert before leaving New York, he shows you letters from young people inspired by the Nautilus expedition, eager to join future Arctic voyages. Despite the journey's failure to reach its primary goal, it has captured imaginations and advanced scientific understanding. Perhaps that's success of a different kind. We may not have reached the pole, Sir Hubert says, but we've shown what's possible. The next attempt will go further, and eventually someone will succeed where we had to turn back. You nod, believing him despite everything. His vision has always extended beyond immediate obstacles to see possibilities others miss. It's what led him to attempt the submarine journey in the first place, when most experts said it couldn't be done. It's what kept him pushing forward through mechanical failures, storms, and ultimately the loss of the diving planes that made under-ice navigation impossible. As you prepare to leave his office, Sir Hubert hands you a small package. Inside is a piece of ice drill, mounted as a paperweight. To remember what we attempted, he says simply, and what we'll achieve next time. You accept the gift, feeling its weight in your hand, a tangible reminder of an extraordinary journey that most people will never fully comprehend, a piece of equipment that represented hope, the possibility of escape if trapped beneath the ice, even if its effectiveness was never proven. That night, you pack your few belongings, preparing to leave New York the following day. The paperweight goes into your bag, wrapped carefully in a spare shirt. Whatever comes next, whatever you decide about Sir Hubert's offer to join a future expedition, you want to keep this memento of the journey that changed you. Your sleep is deep and dreamless, your body finally beginning to truly recover from the months of cold and strain. When you wake, sunlight streams through the window. Another day, another step away from the Arctic, or perhaps another step toward returning to it with better equipment and greater knowledge. As you dress, you catch your reflection in the mirror and pause, studying the face looking back at you. It's not the same face that joined the Nautilus expedition all those months ago. This face is leaner, with new lines around the eyes and mouth. The eyes themselves seem different too, deeper, having seen things most people never will. The Arctic has marked you, changed you in ways both visible and invisible. You carried ice in your beard and frost on your eyelashes. You felt your lungs burn with cold so intense it seemed to freeze you from the inside out. You endured darkness and claustrophobia, and the knowledge that help was hundreds of miles away if anything went catastrophically wrong. But you also witnessed beauty few have ever seen. The midnight sun casting golden light across endless ice, the eerie blue glow beneath floating ice floes, the strange, graceful dance of jellyfish in waters most humans will never visit, the vast emptiness that somehow fills rather than empties the soul. You close your suitcase, decision made. When Sir Hubert builds his new submarine, properly insulated with reliable engines and effective safety features, you'll be there, not because the first journey was easy or safe, but because it wasn't, because you've seen enough to know what might be possible with the right vessel and proper preparation, because having gone as far as the Nautilus could take you, you want to go further still. The Arctic is waiting, its secrets still largely untouched beneath the ice, and despite everything, or because of it, you want to be among those who discover them. As you check out of the hotel and step onto the busy New York street, your mind is already turning toward the future, not the immediate future of returning to ordinary work and life, but the more distant possibility of another journey north, a better equipped attempt to reach the pole and uncover the mysteries that lie beneath the Arctic ice. You survived the first attempt in a World War I submarine that was never equal to the task it was given. Next time, with a vessel designed for the purpose, perhaps survival won't be the achievement. Perhaps next time, success will be. The calendar on your desk shows October 1937, almost 6 years since the Nautilus expedition. Outside your office window, autumn leaves spiral down to the street below. You've settled into a routine that would have seemed impossible during those frozen months in the Arctic. A steady job with a radio communications company in Boston, a small but comfortable apartment, regular meals that don't consist of beans and hardtack. Your fingers move automatically across the technical drawings spread before you. The company values your expertise with radio equipment in extreme conditions, knowledge gained during those harrowing months aboard the Nautilus. Few people understand how cold affects wiring, how condensation can create short circuits, how equipment that works perfectly in a laboratory might fail completely in sub-zero temperatures. A knock at your door interrupts your concentration. Your secretary enters with a telegram in hand. "Just arrived for you, sir," marked urgent. You thank her and unfold the yellow paper. The message is brief but sends a jolt through you like touching a live wire. From Wilkins: "Stop planning new Arctic submarine expedition. Stop British funding secured. Stop your expertise needed. Stop arriving Boston next week to discuss. Stop." 6 years melts away in an instant. Your heart rate quickens as memories flood back. The scrape of ice against metal, the bone-deep cold that never relented, the claustrophobic quarters where 20 men lived for months on end, but also the midnight sun casting golden light across endless ice, the scientific discoveries that changed our understanding of the Arctic, the camaraderie forged in extreme conditions. Sir Hubert Wilkins has never given up on his dream. In the years since the Nautilus expedition, he's continued his polar explorations, though none as ambitious as attempting to reach the North Pole by submarine. You've stayed loosely in touch, exchanging occasional letters. You know he's been working with Lincoln Ellsworth on Antarctic expeditions, served as a consultant on various Arctic projects, and continued to promote the scientific value of polar research. You assumed his submarine ambitions had been set aside after the Nautilus. Apparently not. The rest of your workday passes in a fog of distraction. Your mind keeps returning to the Arctic, not just the hardships which time has somewhat softened in your memory, but the sense of purpose, of being part of something genuinely historic. Your current work is respectable, comfortable, secure, and sometimes you find yourself staring out the window, wondering if this is all there is. That evening, you pull a worn journal from your bookshelf, your personal record of the Nautilus expedition. You haven't looked at it in years, but the pages fall open to familiar entries, written in handwriting that grows increasingly shaky as the journey progressed and the cold seeped deeper into your bones. October 15th, 1931, third day of repairs in Bergen, still no replacement parts, morale low. Wilkins alone seems undeterred. Sometimes I wonder if he's mad or merely sees possibilities the rest of us can't. November 2nd, 1931, temperature inside the submarine dropped to 28 degrees last night. Water pipes froze. Condensation forming ice crystals on all metal surfaces. How are we expected to function in these conditions? Johnson says the engines won't last another week in this cold. August 22nd, 1931. Disaster. The diving planes are gone. Crilly went overboard to check and confirmed they're missing entirely. Some suggest sabotage, others think they were torn off by ice. Either way, we can't dive safely, which means we can't reach the pole. After everything we've endured, to be stopped by this. You close the journal, memories vivid and unsettling. The suspected sabotage was never proven. No one was ever officially blamed, but suspicions remained that someone on board, perhaps fearing the dangers of diving under the ice, had deliberately damaged the submarine's diving planes, making it impossible to control depth while submerged. In the years since, you've sometimes wondered about alternative explanations. Could the diving planes have been damaged earlier in the journey, perhaps during one of the severe storms, and simply gone unnoticed until that critical moment? Or were they inadequately attached during the submarine's hasty refit, the bolts gradually working loose over months of strain? You never reached a conclusion, and now it hardly matters. What matters is that Sir Hubert is planning another attempt, this time with British funding. A new submarine, presumably better designed for Arctic conditions, and he wants your expertise. The week passes slowly. You find yourself pulling out old notes about radio equipment modifications you'd sketched during the Nautilus expedition, improvements you'd imagined but never had the resources to implement, ideas for better insulation, more reliable power sources, ways to protect delicate components from the killing cold of the Arctic. When Sir Hubert finally arrives at your office, he looks older but no less energetic. His handshake is firm, his eyes bright with the same enthusiasm that convinced 20 men to sail to the Arctic in an aging submarine not designed for polar conditions. "Good to see you," he says, settling into the chair across from your desk. "You're looking well. Civilized life seems to agree with you." You offer him coffee, which he accepts gratefully. For a few minutes you exchange pleasantries, catching up on the intervening years. He asks about other crew members you've stayed in contact with. You inquire about his Antarctic expeditions with Ellsworth. Then he gets to the point. The British Admiralty is interested in Arctic submarine operations. They're providing funding for a properly designed vessel, not a converted wartime leftover like the Nautilus. Air conditioning, proper insulation, reliable engines, effective heating systems. Everything we wished for in 31. Why now, you ask? What's changed? Sir Hubert's expression turns serious. The world's situation, for one thing. Europe is rearming, Germany, Italy, the Soviet Union. Everyone's preparing for the possibility of another war. The Arctic has strategic importance, potential shipping routes, weather monitoring capabilities. The British want to establish expertise in polar submarine operations before anyone else does. You nod, understanding. The political climate has indeed darkened since the Nautilus expedition. Civil war in Spain, Japan's invasion of China, Hitler's growing power in Germany, tensions are rising globally, and technology advances rapidly in response. But there's more to it than military considerations, Sir Hubert continues, the familiar passion returning to his voice. The scientific potential remains enormous. Everything we discovered with the Nautilus, the Gulf Stream's northern branch, the marine life adaptations, the gravitational measurements, they've all advanced our understanding, but there's so much more to learn beneath the polar ice. He outlines the plans for the new submarine, to be built in Britain using the latest technology. Unlike the Nautilus, this vessel will be designed specifically for Arctic exploration from the beginning, not retrofitted after the fact. The scientific equipment will be state-of-the-art, the safety features comprehensive. "We need your expertise with communications equipment in extreme conditions," Sir Hubert says. "No one else has your practical experience. This time we'll be able to maintain reliable contact throughout the expedition." You find yourself wanting to say yes immediately, the old excitement stirring despite everything you endured, but caution born of hard experience makes you ask questions first about the submarine specifications, about the safety systems, about the crew selection process, about contingency plans if things go wrong. Sir Hubert answers patiently, in detail. It's clear he's learned from the Nautilus experience as well. This won't be a hastily organised adventure, but a carefully planned scientific expedition with proper resources and preparation. When would this happen, you ask finally? Construction starts early next year, sea trials in late 38, the Arctic attempt in summer 39 when ice conditions are most favourable. You ask for time to consider the offer, which he grants readily. As he leaves your office, he hands you a folder containing detailed plans for the new submarine and expedition. Read these, he says. I think you'll be impressed by how far submarine technology has advanced in just 6 years. That night, you pore over the documents. The proposed submarine is indeed a far cry from the Nautilus. Modern diesel-electric propulsion, reinforced hull designed to withstand ice pressure, advanced air purification systems, proper insulation throughout, effective heating that won't drain batteries excessively, redundant safety features, specially designed ice drills that have been thoroughly tested in actual Arctic conditions. Most impressive is the scientific laboratory space, far larger and better equipped than anything you had aboard the Nautilus. Clearly, this expedition is intended to produce significant research beyond the achievement of reaching the pole itself. Your wife finds you still studying the plans at midnight. She's heard enough about the Nautilus expedition over the years to understand what Sir Hubert's offer means. You're considering it, aren't you? She asks, sitting beside you. You nod. It's different this time. Better planned, better equipped. The submarine is being designed for Arctic conditions from the start, not cobbled together like the Nautilus. She looks at the plans spread across the table, then back at you. You never really came all the way back from the Arctic, did you? Part of you is still there. Her words strike you as profoundly true. Despite returning to normal life, building a career, getting married, part of you has remained in that frozen world of ice and extremes. The experience marked you in ways too deep to fully explain to someone who wasn't there. The Nautilus changed me, you admit. Changed how I see the world, what I think is possible, what humans can endure and accomplish. She squeezes your hand. Then you should go. Just promise me better communications this time. I don't want weeks of silence wondering if you're alive or dead under the ice. You promise, grateful for her understanding. The next day, you send a telegram to Sir Hubert accepting his offer. The following months are a whirlwind of preparation. You take a leave of absence from your company, arrange for your apartment to be maintained during your extended absence, and travel to England where the new submarine is being constructed. Your role is to design and implement the communication systems, ensuring they'll function reliably in Arctic conditions. Working on the submarine is a revelation. Unlike the Nautilus, which was already an aging vessel when acquired for the 1931 expedition, this is cutting-edge technology. The shipyard workers and engineers treat the project with the utmost seriousness, aware of its scientific and potential military significance. During this time, you reconnect with some former Nautilus crew members who have also joined the new expedition. Williams is now an experienced submarine officer. Peters has established himself as a marine biologist specializing in polar ecosystems. Johnson declined to return to the Arctic, but recommended his younger brother, an engineer with experience in extreme environments. Together, you sometimes reminisce about the Nautilus, finding humour now in hardships that seemed anything but funny at the time. The constant condensation that dripped on sleeping faces, the emergency bucket brigade when leaks threatened to flood compartments during storms. The time Captain Dannenhauer's logbook froze solid and had to be thawed over a lamp before he could write in it. But you also discuss what went wrong and how this expedition will be different. Better insulation means no more freezing condensation. Improved hull design and material quality mean fewer leaks. Effective heating systems mean no more frozen logbooks or equipment. Most importantly, the sabotage, if that's what it was, that prevented the Nautilus from diving safely under the ice won't be possible on the new submarine. The diving planes and other critical components are better designed, more securely attached, and regularly inspected. No single person could disable them without being discovered. As the submarine takes shape in the shipyard, news from Europe grows increasingly troubling. Germany annexes Austria in March 1938. Tensions rise over the Sudetenland. The possibility of war, which seemed distant when Sir Hubert first approached you, now looms larger with each passing month. In September 1938, just as the submarine is nearing completion, the Munich Agreement temporarily diffuses the immediate crisis, but few believe it represents lasting peace. The British government's interest in Arctic submarine capabilities takes on greater urgency. What began primarily as a scientific expedition now carries military implications as well. Sir Hubert remains focused on the scientific goals, but even he can't ignore the changing political landscape. If war comes, he tells you during one planning session, knowledge of Arctic conditions will be strategically valuable. The northern sea routes could become vital if traditional shipping lanes are threatened. The submarine undergoes sea trials in the North Sea during the winter of 1938-39. You're aboard for these tests, monitoring the communications systems in cold weather conditions. The vessel performs admirably. The heating systems maintain comfortable temperatures despite freezing conditions outside. The reinforced hull handles rough seas with ease. The diesel-electric propulsion system proves reliable and quieter than the Nautilus's engines ever were. Most importantly, the diving systems function perfectly. The submarine can maintain precise depth control, essential for navigating under ice, where surfacing might be impossible for extended periods. The specialized ice drills, designed to create air holes if needed, are tested on actual ice flows and work as intended. After returning from sea trials, you find a letter waiting from Captain Dannenhauer, who is now serving with the US Navy and couldn't join the new expedition. He writes of increasing American interest in submarine capabilities, including potential Arctic operations. The Nautilus expedition, despite its failure to reach the pole, planted seeds that are now bearing fruit in multiple nations' naval planning. His letter concludes with a reflection that resonates deeply with you. What we attempted in 1931 was perhaps premature given the technology available, but it was not foolish. Sometimes being too early is the necessary precursor to eventual success. I believe you and Sir Hubert will accomplish what we could not, and I will watch your progress with great interest. As spring 1939 arrives, final preparations for the expedition begin in earnest. Scientific equipment is installed and calibrated. Supplies are carefully calculated and loaded. The crew, a mixture of veterans like yourself and newcomers selected for specific expertise, undergoes specialized training for Arctic operations. Then, in late April, an unexpected message arrives from the Admiralty. Due to the deteriorating international situation, the expedition is being postponed indefinitely. The submarine may be needed for defense purposes if hostilities break out. Scientific exploration, however valuable, must take second place to national security. Sir Hubert argues passionately against the postponement. He points out that summer offers the best ice conditions, that all preparations are complete, that delaying now wastes months of work and planning, but the decision stands. The Arctic will have to wait. The disappointment is profound. You had mentally prepared yourself to return to the extreme conditions of the far north, to face the challenges and dangers of under-ice navigation. Now, with everything ready, the expedition is suddenly on hold with no clear timeline for resumption. This isn't a cancellation, Sir Hubert insists when you meet to discuss the situation. Only a delay. Once the European situation stabilizes, we'll proceed as planned. But events move rapidly. Germany invades Poland on September 1st, 1939. Britain and France declare war 2 days later. World War II begins, and with it, any hope of conducting the Arctic expedition in the near future evaporates. The submarine you helped prepare for scientific exploration is commissioned into the Royal Navy for war service. Its reinforced hull and extended range make it well suited for combat operations, though its specialized Arctic features go unused. You watch it depart for its first war patrol with mixed emotions, pride in having contributed to its capabilities, regret that its primary purpose has been diverted. You return to the United States, resuming your civilian work with a deeper appreciation for its stability and safety. The knowledge gained from the Nautilus expedition and the preparations for the British venture prove valuable in designing communications equipment for military applications as America begins its own rearmament program. Throughout the war years, you maintain correspondence with Sir Hubert and other former expedition members who are scattered across various military and civilian roles. Sir Hubert himself serves as a consultant to the Australian and American military, his Arctic expertise finding new applications in wartime planning. In your letters, you sometimes speculate about what might have been, how close you came to making a second attempt on the North Pole, how the technology was finally adequate to the task. Sir Hubert never loses his optimism, writing in 1943, "When this war ends, exploration will resume. The Arctic remains largely unknown beneath its ice. Someday, someone will succeed where we had to turn back." As the war progresses, you occasionally hear rumours of German and Soviet interest in Arctic submarine operations. The strategic importance that Sir Hubert predicted has become reality, though in a context none of you anticipated when planning peaceful scientific exploration. In 1945, with the war's end, you wonder briefly if the British expedition might be revived, but the economic realities of post-war reconstruction make such expensive scientific ventures unlikely. The submarine that would have carried you to the North Pole has served throughout the conflict and is now outdated compared to newer designs developed during the war years. Life moves forward. Your career advances. You have children who grow up hearing stories of the Arctic that seem as fantastical to them as tales of distant planets. The Nautilus expedition recedes in public memory, becoming a footnote in the history of polar exploration rather than the groundbreaking achievement Sir Hubert had envisioned. Then, in 1954, you receive a letter from Sir Hubert, now in his late 60s but still actively involved in scientific and exploration circles. He writes of a new American submarine under construction, the world's first nuclear-powered vessel, coincidentally also named Nautilus. The USS Nautilus will have capabilities far beyond anything you could have imagined in 1931 or even 1939. This vessel could truly reach the North Pole, Sir Hubert writes. No need to surface for air, no batteries to drain, unlimited range. The technology has finally caught up with our vision. You follow the USS Nautilus's development with keen interest. When she's commissioned in 1954, you attend the ceremony as Sir Hubert's guest. The contrast between this sleek, powerful vessel and the converted World War I submarine that carried you into the Arctic is staggering. This is truly a machine designed to conquer the under-ice environment that defeated your expedition. At the reception following the commissioning, you meet some of the officers who will serve aboard the nuclear submarine. They're aware of the 1931 expedition and full of questions about the challenges of Arctic operations. You find yourself in the unfamiliar role of elder statesman, sharing hard-won knowledge with a new generation of explorers. One young officer asks what you consider the greatest lesson from the Nautilus expedition. You think carefully before answering. Respect the Arctic, but don't fear it, you finally say. We went north in a vessel utterly inadequate for the conditions, with technology that wasn't ready for what we were attempting. We failed to reach the pole, but we survived. We collected valuable scientific data. We proved submarine operations in the Arctic were possible, if difficult. Most importantly, we learned what would be needed for future success. You don't tell them about the nights when you lay awake in your bunk aboard the Nautilus, listening to ice scrape against the hull and wondering if it would hold, or the times when temperatures dropped so low that equipment froze solid and your breath turned to ice crystals in your beard. Or the moment when you learned the diving planes were gone and with them any hope of reaching the pole. Those experiences belong to you and the others who were there. What matters now is that the knowledge gained, the lessons learned, will help this new generation succeed where yours had to turn back. In 1958, when news breaks that the USS Nautilus has successfully crossed the Arctic Ocean beneath the ice and passed directly under the North Pole, you feel a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in having been part of the journey that helped make this achievement possible. A touch of envy that others completed what you and your comrades attempted. But mostly satisfaction that Sir Hubert's vision has finally been realised, even if he didn't live to see it himself. Sir Hubert passed away just months before the USS Nautilus reached the pole, but in a fitting tribute, the submarine's commander, William R. Anderson, arranged for Sir Hubert's ashes to be scattered at the North Pole during a later expedition in 1959. The man who first dared to dream of under-ice exploration finally reached his goal. That night, you pull out your old journal from the 1931 expedition. The yellowed pages and faded ink testify to the passage of years, but the experiences recorded remain vivid in your memory. You turn to the final entry, written after the Nautilus was scuttled in the Norwegian fjord. November 20th, 1931. Today, we consigned the Nautilus to the depths. Despite everything, the mechanical failures, the brutal cold, the ultimate inability to reach the pole, I find myself strangely reluctant to see her go. For all her flaws, she carried us through one of the greatest adventures of our lives. Sir Hubert says someday, someone will succeed where we had to turn back. I believe he's right. And when they do, perhaps they'll remember those who tried first, who showed what was possible and what remained to be overcome. You close the journal, a sense of completion washing over you. The Arctic claimed a part of you during those frozen months aboard the Nautilus, but it gave something in return, a role in a continuing story of human exploration and discovery. You wouldn't have survived the North Pole in a World War I submarine. No one would have, but you helped pave the way for those who eventually did. Your eyes grow heavy as you sit by the window, the journal resting in your lap. Outside, stars shine in a clear night sky, including the North Star that guided sailors for centuries before submarines could pass beneath the pole it marks. Your breathing slows as sleep approaches, carrying you back to that world of ice and cold and endless white horizons, but this time without the fear and hardship that accompanied the reality. In dreams, you return to the Arctic not as it was, but as it might have been, beautiful, challenging, but ultimately conquerable. And somewhere far to the north, beneath the permanent ice cap, the nuclear-powered USS Nautilus silently continues the journey that you and your comrades began so many years before, finally fulfilling Sir Hubert Wilkins's extraordinary vision of reaching the North Pole by submarine. The morning sun streams through the windows of your retirement home apartment, warming your arthritic hands as you sort through the day's mail. At 93, your fingers aren't as nimble as they once were, but they still remember the bite of Arctic cold, the feel of frozen metal controls, the constant dampness that permeated everything aboard the Nautilus so many decades ago. Most days, that expedition in 1931 feels like something that happened to someone else, a young man you barely remember being. World War II, a long career in communications technology, marriage, children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren have filled the intervening years. The world has changed almost beyond recognition. Men have walked on the moon. Computers that once would have filled the entire Nautilus now fit in your pocket. But some mornings, like today, the Arctic reaches across time to touch you again. You recognise the Norwegian postmark on the large envelope before you even read the return address. Carefully, you open it to find a letter and several photographs that make your breath catch in your throat. The letter is from Dr. Hans Fricke, a German oceanographer and explorer. He writes that he's leading an expedition to locate and document the wreck of the Nautilus, which has lain at the bottom of the Bergen Fjord since November 1931. Norwegian Navy sonar tests accidentally discovered the submarine's location in 1981, but no comprehensive study was ever undertaken. Now, with modern submersible technology, Dr. Fricke plans to visit the wreck and record its condition. He's writing to you as one of the last surviving crew members of the Nautilus expedition. Would you be willing to share any recollections or insights that might help their research? Anything about the submarine's final condition, modifications made for Arctic travel, or specific areas they should examine? The photographs show sonar images of a submarine-shaped object sitting upright on the sea floor. Even in these grainy technical images, you recognize the distinctive outline of the vessel that carried you to the edge of the Arctic ice pack 74 years ago. Your hands tremble slightly, not just from age, but from emotion. The Nautilus, still there all this time, 1,138 feet beneath the surface of the Norwegian fjord, where she was deliberately sunk when deemed unfit to return to America. You set aside the letter and photographs and move to the window, gazing out at a world so different from the one you knew aboard that submarine. Your mind drifts back, not to the hardships this time, the bitter cold, the mechanical failures, the cramped conditions, but to moments you seldom speak of, even to family. You remember standing on the deck during a rare calm day, watching the midnight sun cast golden light across ice floes that stretched to the horizon, the air so clear it made your lungs ache, the silence so profound you could hear your own heartbeat, the beauty so overwhelming it brought tears to your eyes despite the freezing temperature that immediately turned them to ice on your cheeks. You remember the camaraderie that developed among the crew, 20 men from different backgrounds united by the shared experience of extreme conditions. How you learned to communicate with minimal words, to anticipate each other's needs, to find humour in hardships that would have broken you individually. You remember the scientific work that gave purpose to the journey even after it became clear you wouldn't reach the pole, the careful collection of water samples from different depths, the plankton nets gathering microscopic life forms from the Arctic Ocean, the gravity measurements that helped confirm the Earth's shape, work that added to human knowledge even as the primary goal remained elusive. These memories have stayed with you while others from that same period have faded. You can't recall the name of the hotel where you stayed in New York after the expedition, but you remember exactly how ice sounded scraping against the submarine's hull, a high, eerie keening that set your teeth on edge and made sleep impossible. With a sigh, you return to your desk and pull out a leather-bound journal from the drawer. Your record of the expedition preserved all these years. You haven't opened it in a long time, but the pages fall naturally to entries you once read and reread, trying to make sense of what you'd experienced. A particular passage catches your eye, written during a moment of rare, quiet contemplation while the Nautilus was anchored in a lead of open water surrounded by ice. August 15th, 1931. Stood watch from midnight to 4 a.m, completely still outside. No wind, no movement in the ice, just endless white under a sun that circles the horizon but never sets. Hard to describe the feeling of isolation. We might as well be on another planet. The nearest humans are hundreds of miles away. If something goes catastrophically wrong, no one can help us. Yet there's a strange peace in this knowledge. We've reached a place few have ever seen, in a way no one has attempted before. Whatever happens, we've pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Those words still resonate across the decades. You've lived a full life since then, fought in a war, built a career, raised a family, but nothing ever quite matched the intensity of those months aboard the Nautilus, pushing into one of Earth's last frontiers in a vessel barely adequate for the journey. You pick up a pen and begin to write a response to Dr. Fricker. Your handwriting isn't what it once was, but your memories remain sharp. You describe the modifications made to the Nautilus for Arctic exploration, the wooden superstructure with skids designed to let the submarine slide along under the ice, the shock absorber built into the bow, the ice drills that were supposed to create air holes if you became trapped. You explain the layout of the submarine as you remember it, noting areas that might be of particular interest. The diving chamber converted from the torpedo room, the control room where Captain Dannenhauer stood for hours navigating through treacherous waters, the engine room that was always problematically warmer than the rest of the freezing vessel. You mention the suspected sabotage of the diving planes that ultimately prevented the submarine from safely navigating under the ice to the pole. This remains one of the great unresolved questions of the expedition. Were the diving planes deliberately damaged by someone aboard, fearing the dangers of under-ice navigation? Or were they torn off by ice or lost due to mechanical failure? Perhaps modern examination of the wreck might provide answers. You write for hours, surprised by how readily the details come back, the specific equipment used for scientific measurements, the modifications made to radio apparatus to function in extreme cold, the heating system that proved woefully inadequate for Arctic conditions. When you finally set down your pen, you filled several pages with information that might help Dr. Fricky's expedition, but you've also reconnected with a part of yourself that has remained frozen in time, preserved like the Nautilus itself in the cold depths of memory. The following weeks bring more correspondence from Norway. Dr. Fricky's team is preparing for their expedition, scheduled for September 2005. They'll use a manned submersible called Jago to dive to the Nautilus and document its condition with high-resolution cameras and sonar equipment. Would you be interested in seeing the results? Of course you would. The thought of seeing the Nautilus again, even through photographs taken by others, stirs something inside you. Not nostalgia exactly, the conditions were too harsh for that, but a sense of completion, of circling back to an experience that shaped the rest of your life in ways both obvious and subtle. You find yourself thinking more and more about the Nautilus as the expedition date approaches. Memories surface that you haven't considered in decades. The taste of the burnt coffee that was a luxury early in the journey but ran out long before you reached the Arctic. The sound of Johnson singing old sea shanties under his breath as he worked endless hours trying to keep the engines functioning. The feel of your bunk, narrow and uncomfortable, but still a refuge from the constant demands of submarine operation. One night, you dream you're back aboard the Nautilus, not as you are now, elderly and frail, but as the young man you were in 1931. In the dream, the submarine slides smoothly beneath the Arctic ice, the problems with the diving planes somehow resolved. You move through clear water, watching the strange blue light filter down through the ice above. You reach the North Pole, accomplishing what was impossible in reality. When you wake, the sense of achievement lingers, along with a bittersweet awareness of what might have been. September arrives, and with it news that Dr. Fricke's expedition is underway. The research vessel has reached Bergen, and the submersible Jago is being prepared for its dives to the Nautilus. You follow their progress through emails from Dr. Fricke's assistant, translated from German and printed in large font to accommodate your aging eyes. Then, on a crisp autumn day, a package arrives containing a DVD and a letter. The expedition is complete. The Jago submersible successfully located and documented the Nautilus over the course of 4 dives, capturing 1,600 digital images and 8 hours of video footage. The DVD contains some of this material prepared especially for you. Your granddaughter helps you set up the television and DVD player, curious about this piece of your history she's heard mentioned but never fully explained. You were really on a submarine expedition to the North Pole, Grandpa, like something out of a Jules Verne novel? You smile at the apt comparison. Jules Verne's grandson was at the christening of the Nautilus, you tell her. The submarine was named after the one in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Sir Hubert Wilkins loved that book. It inspired his dream of exploring beneath the Arctic ice.